Order. We start with questions. The Secretary of State for Business and Trade, Dr. Maria Tipple.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
The steel industry has been in decline, and we intend to turn this around. That's why we're developing a steel strategy, that's why we're investing up to £2.5 billion, and that's why we're working at pace. The steel sector in South Yorkshire and across the UK has been neglected for too long, and we intend to change that.
Dr. Britton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Stocksbridge Speciality Steels in my constituency is a world-leading plant with specialist capability to produce cleaner and stronger high-grade steel for our aerospace industry. The plant supports hundreds of jobs and has an exceptional skills training centre on site with links to local universities. Will the Secretary of State meet with me to discuss the future strategic significance of Stocksbridge Speciality Steels and its fundamental importance to our steel industry nationally?
Can I thank my honourable friend for that question and for her championing of her constituency and the industries within it. She makes a very good point, and I met with her recently to talk about this, and I met with representatives from Community Union from the steel sector in her area this week as well, and I'm always happy to meet again and see what we can do.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Minister knows, it's not just South Yorkshire that is facing difficult decisions about the steel industry. I thank her for our recent meeting about the future of Scunthorpe. Is she able to add anything to the timeline of when we might expect an announcement? Because, as she will appreciate, particularly at this time of the year, there's growing anxiety amongst the workforce.
Minister.
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for his question and for his interest in his constituents and their jobs and the steel industry. We have met, as he says, to talk about this. I don't have anything new to add today other than we continue with the conversations with British Steel. We are working as fast as we can. Obviously, it's ultimately up to them to make the decision about what they want to do and what they want to take forward, but we stand ready to support and to work with them.
Alex Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, we recently launched Unlock Europe, a new export programme designed to help UK businesses build stronger relationships with European customers. In addition, last month in Manchester, my right honourable friend also launched a new pilot scheme alongside the Mayor and his team to offer more support to help businesses in the North West sell their products and services overseas. We are determined to do more and will bring forward further plans in due course.
Alex Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Exports from our aerospace, defence, security and space sectors contribute around 40 billion to our economy. But many of the small businesses I speak to in Aldershot and Farnborough are limited in their ability to export without additional support. What can ministers do to help them? And would the government consider reinstating the Trade Show Access Programme closed down by the Conservatives to help more SMEs trade around the world?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to say that we have to do more to help small businesses in particular, but businesses in general, to export more overseas. It's one of the key but often understated ways in which we can deliver growth to this country. As part of our work on a new trade strategy and as part of our work on a small business strategy, we are looking at further proposals to help businesses export more.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Italian press has been reporting that the Global Combat Air Programme consortium involving the UK, Italy and Japan might be extended to add Saudi Arabia. Can the Minister confirm this press reporting? And can the government say how this would affect any future suspension of arms export licences to Saudi Arabia, as the UK government did in 2019?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his question. We are looking at working with other partners in terms of the GCAP programme, and I was grateful to have the opportunity to be in Italy last month to discuss the further potential of GCAP and indeed other work that we can do with the Italians in this space, but it won't affect the issue that he's specifically concerned about.
Dr. Neil Shustra-Hurst.
Question number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the budget, the government was forced to make some difficult choices, but the fundamentals of doing business in the UK remain strong. The government's agenda of creating an industrial strategy, getting people back to work, reforming our planning system, rebuilding our relationship with the EU, pensions reform and more, are all focused on improving the long-term business environment across the UK.
Dr. Neil Shastri.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the aftermath of the budget, I spoke with many business leaders in my constituency of Solihull West and Shirley, and invariably what they were saying to me was that they are pausing recruitment and they are freezing their growth plans as a direct consequence of the decisions made around taxation and the Employment Rights Bill. What does the Secretary of State say to those businesses in my constituency who no longer have confidence in the government and feel abandoned by their policies?
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable member for his question. I would say, first of all, the budget was 7 weeks ago, so if the Conservative Party, which didn't tell us when they were in government how they would pay for the promises they made, now has a plan to pay for them, I'm welcome to receive it. I'll have it in writing, I'll have it here in oral questions, in a statement, but the raw reality is the Conservative Party made promises they had no intention of keeping. We're not going to do that. We're going to fix the foundations. We're going to do what we say. But the reason this government will succeed on growth, on business investment in a way the previous government did not, are those fundamentals. The return to political stability in the UK and openness to the rest of the world, including the EU, which I know is a difficult subject for Conservative members, but is still our major trading partner. And the willingness of this government to use its mandate to improve the business and investor environment. Those are the fundamentals which mean the future of the UK is a very, very promising one.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Steel manufacturing companies are a vital West Midlands industry, but business confidence is being dented by retrospective charging of steel safeguarding duties by HMRC. Companies affected in my constituency and elsewhere feel these were unfairly and wrongly imposed on them during the chaotic Brexit transition period. They tried to work with the last government but got nowhere on it. Given the importance of the steel sector to British industry, would the Minister work with the Treasury to resolve this issue and make sure these vital businesses are protected from hefty bills which they should never have been charged in the first place?
Friend for raising this important matter, and I can understand in terms of the sums of money involved why that is such a substantial issue for businesses in her constituency. Mr. Speaker, the issue does relate to the duties that were charged at that time, a time of significant political uncertainty, and of course whilst it's a Treasury issue, it relates to taxation. I can promise her we'll get her the meeting she needs and work with her to ensure she's getting the answers she's requesting for her constituents.
Shadow Minister Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On business confidence, there is no clearer pointer than the Bank of England's recent survey on employers' response to the budget. 59% expect lower profit margins. 54% expect to raise prices. 54% expect lower employment. 38% expect to pay lower wages than they otherwise would have done. And now City AM report that Labour have carelessly lost all their business backers. So is the Secretary of State going to show any contrition, admit that business confidence is through the floor, and start standing up for business rather than the Treasury?
Well, what can I say? Was it the Conservative Party who increased corporation tax from 19% to 25% in one budget? Was it the Conservative Party who crashed business investment and business confidence with the way they mishandled Brexit, failing to prepare for either outcomes of a yes-no referendum? And who on the front bench played a role in the mini-budget? I think, frankly, it was all of them. So, with respect to the honourable member, I will not take advice from him. I will say again, since the budget, I've heard repeatedly from Conservative colleagues they want to lower taxes and increase spending, even though they couldn't account for the promises they did make when they were in government. It's not credible unless you engage with the reality, and that is what this government is doing, whether it's the response to the Chancellor's speech in Mansion House or finally sorting out Marks and Spencer's this week. We are a government getting on with the job and looking to the future.
Greg Smith.
Mr. Speaker, sorry seems to be the hardest word. Further proving I'm talking about their budget. Further proving how low business confidence is getting under this government. In evidence provided to the Employment Rights Bill Committee, Jane Grattan of the British Chamber of Commerce predicted a reduced hiring appetite were this legislation to come in, and that means their members would be less likely to recruit new employees due to the risks and difficulty, particularly under day one rights. If business confidence is low, employment goes down. We already know that every Labour government leaves unemployment higher than when they started office. But isn't it a bit extreme for this Labour government to actually legislate for that outcome?
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, that statistic is not actually true if you Google it, but I appreciate it's demanding being in opposition and you don't always have the capacity and resources that you need. But I would simply say again, as we had in the excellent second reading of this legislation, the vast majority of employees in the UK already operate to a higher standard than the floor is being raised with this Employment Rights Bill. I do, and I don't in any way pull back from the fact that some of the most vulnerable, insecure and low-paid members of our society will benefit from this bill. This is exactly what it is about. And these are people, Mr. Speaker, who've maybe given up on politics, don't think the political system, the mainstream political system, can deliver for them. And the claim that somehow certain industries require a supply of labour that doesn't give people the kind of security and dignity they need alongside those jobs, I reject that case entirely. This is a set of proportionate, reasonable reforms that will make a difference. Thank you.
The list here. Manira Wilson.
Question number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We recognise the vital role that kinship carers play in caring for vulnerable children and the challenges that many face in balancing this care with employment. We've recently announced the largest ever investment to support kinship carers, £40 million to trial a kinship allowance in up to 10 local authorities. We will also review the parental leave system to ensure that it best supports all working families, and work is already underway planning for that delivery.
Manira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his answer. I'm sure he'll agree with me that kinship carers are unsung heroes who often step up at a moment's notice to look after a child whose parents can't look after them. Yet 4 in 10 are forced to give up work to do so, which means they're often struggling to pay the bills or put food on the table. So will the Minister look to right this wrong through the Employment Rights Bill and introduce a right to paid employment leave for kinship carers, given the savings to the public's purse from kinship care and the better outcomes for children?
Yeah. I thank the honourable member for a question. I indeed met a kinship carer in my own constituency very recently who told me about the challenges that she's articulated, and actually the thing that she said was most important to her was actually getting that respite care, which I think is something that we can all recognise. We are looking at how that trial will pan out. I've spoken to my honourable friend, the member for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, in detail about some of the proposals that are coming forward. But we think it's best to see how this trial works and also have a look at the wider review of the parental leave system.
Rebecca Paul.
Question number 5, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will answer questions 5 and 7 together. Hospitality businesses are at the heart of our communities and vital for economic growth. The Government is creating a fairer business rate system, reducing alcohol duty on qualifying draft products and reforming the apprenticeship levy to support businesses and boost opportunities. Through the hospitality sector, we're addressing strategic issues for the sector relating to high street regeneration, skills, sustainability and productivity. And that work will be supported by the publication of the Small Business Strategy Command Paper next year.
Rebecca Paul.
I thank the Minister for his answer. In Reigate, Redhill, Banstead and our villages, we have many amazing pubs which contribute hugely to the economy, like the Garibaldi, a community pub in Redhill. For these businesses to thrive, reform of the unfair business rate system by 2026 is critical. Please can the Minister commit to the proposed 20p reduction to the small business rate multiplier, the absolute minimum needed for long-term sustainability of the pub sector?
Well, the Honourable Lady will know that my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, committed in the budget recently to a series of reforms on business rates, including permanently lower business rates for hospitality businesses from 26-27, and I welcome her support for that measure.
Sir John Whittingdale.
UK hospitality have estimated that the budget measures will increase the cost of employing one employee by £2,500. And shops and pubs and restaurants across my constituency have said that it will lead to higher prices or fewer jobs. So will the Minister at least consider delaying the implementation of the National Insurance Contribution increase to 26-27 when the planned realignment of business rates is due to come in?
Well, the honourable gentleman will, I'm sure, have noticed that in the budget, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, also more than doubled the employment allowance to £10,500, which will mean that more than 1 million small businesses, many of them hospitality businesses, will see no increase in their national insurance liabilities next year.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, our approach to trade deals considers the impact and opportunities for the agricultural sector, along with other sectors of the economy and, of course, our growth mission. The Government will publish impact assessments to aid the ratification process for new free trade agreements.
Sir Danny Chambers.
Mr. Speaker, I worked with farmers for many years in my role as a veterinary surgeon, and now I meet with them regularly as an MP. And so I'm aware that farmers in Hampshire and the rest of the country were hugely disappointed when the previous Conservative government signed trade deals that undermined our high animal welfare standards. So will the Minister outline what steps he's taking to ensure that British farmers will not have to compete with products produced to lower animal welfare standards, for example, battery hens or the indiscriminate use of antibiotics, which is also a public health issue in future trade deals? Because, Mr. Speaker, I have to say that it's not only vets and farmers who are proud of our high animal welfare standards, but the British public are too, and I'd like the Minister to confirm that he does not want to compromise those.
Speaker, well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for bringing his considerable expertise in veterinary science to the Chamber today. It is the reality that we will not compromise on animal welfare standards as we take forward our programme of free trade agreements. While we might well have approached the negotiations that he refers to under the previous government in a different manner, reopening them would certainly create uncertainty, which we genuinely believe would hurt UK business. We are not seeing Australian or New Zealand beef, lamb flood the UK market, and we will continue to monitor trade flows in relation to both of those FTAs. But on the other hand, he makes a very fair and important point about the need to maintain welfare standards.
Alice MacDonald.
Number 8, please, Mr. Speaker.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer questions 8 and 12 together. Small businesses are at the beating heart of our high streets and communities, and they are essential to our economic success. That is why, as part of Small Business Saturday, I recently announced the Business Growth Service to ensure businesses across the UK get quicker and easier support and advice from government. Further announcements include the Disability Finance Code for entrepreneurship to improve access to capital and tackle inequality for disabled entrepreneurs, and a new Fair Payment Code launched by the Office for Small Business Commissioner to help address late payments. Next year, as my honourable friend has said, the Small Business Strategy will be published to create thriving high streets, easier access to finance, open overseas and domestic markets, and enhance business capability.
Let's back Donald.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Small and medium businesses come in many forms, from micro businesses to community interest companies and cooperatives. Often cooperative and mutual business models are overlooked. Norwich has a proud history of cooperatives. Can the Secretary of State reassure me that in this government's much needed push to support small and medium sized businesses, cooperative and mutual business models are properly included?
Well, very much welcome my honourable friend's question, and my area on the eastern side of Greater Manchester, like hers, has a huge history of the cooperative and mutual movement. That diversity in business models is, I think, a huge strength. They bring different things to market, different ways of doing business, and that resilience that we see from cooperative business models is particularly attractive. I can absolutely assure her that these form part of the government's wider strategy. Our ambition is to double the mutual size of the economy. My honourable friend, the Small Business Minister, is leading on that work, and I'd love to have her and businesses from her local area involved in it.
John Puffy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I had the pleasure of visiting the winners of my first Small Business Saturday Awards in Southampton Itchen. They were Rianne Care, The Bunker, Miss Ellie's Cafe and Julie's Dance Studio. Will the Secretary of State join me in congratulating them for their role in ensuring a thriving local economy? And can he say specifically what assurances he can offer them that this government has the back of small businesses?
Yeah. Well, I'm extremely grateful to my honourable friend for his question, and I can certainly join him in congratulating that local business and indeed the work that all members of Parliament do on their constituency days, championing and supporting local businesses. The agenda that the government has is everything from that long-term reform of business rates, permanently low business rates for retail, hospitality and leisure. I think the launch of high street rental auctions, getting rid of derelict property in town centres is hugely exciting. The Business Growth Service is predominantly about recognising there's a lot that government does, but businesses can often find it hard, difficult to find exactly what they need. I've looked around the world to the US with the Small Business Administration or Singapore with Enterprise Singapore to look at the best models for doing that, and that is what we're going to take forward into 2025, and I find it a hugely exciting agenda.
Wendy Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last Saturday was indeed Small Business Saturday, an opportunity for us to celebrate and support the many small businesses in our constituencies. But the truth is, Mr. Speaker, too many of them are really worried at the moment. They're really worried about the increase in national insurance contributions, the £25 billion jobs tax, which there simply is no easy answer to small businesses. They can't just put the prices up. They're looking at staffing levels. So I'd like to ask the Minister, Mr. Speaker, why is the government so anti-aspiration, and how do they really think they're going to improve productivity and deliver growth in the economy?
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party knows what they left behind, and I've not heard anyone from the Conservative benches offer an alternative. The specific answer to the question she raises is that employment allowance was doubled in the budget and the threshold was taken off, so that's why there are 1 million mainly smaller businesses paying less or the same in national insurance contributions as they were before the budget. If she wants to tell the House how she believes the Conservative Party should pay for the infected blood scandal, which we're all committed to compensating, or post office compensation, steel industry, the advanced manufacturing plan that we inherited, because none of that was in our departmental budget. That is what we're fixing, long-term, fixing the foundations, long-term public investment, and an agenda based on higher business investment and better and stronger economic growth in every part of the UK.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government has raised national insurance charges on employers. It has introduced a family farm and a family business tax. And its employment rights bill will raise business costs by £5 billion, predominantly on small businesses. As a result of these changes, does he believe that SMEs will employ more or fewer people?
Mr. Speaker, I have absolutely no doubt that if you take the government's agenda, it is one for employment, business investment and growth. And I think some of the things this country needs the most could only have been delivered by a change of government. I simply don't believe the Conservative Party is capable of reforming the planning system or having a long-term industrial strategy, fixing our relationship with the European Union and all the rest of it. So I would say to him, yes, there have been challenges, but they know what they left behind. They knew what they were doing. There's a reason the Conservative Party had no spending plans for the next financial year. We've had to confront that reality, but you cannot have the kind of success this country needs unless you're willing to fix the foundations, focus on the long term. The Chancellor did that in the budget, and the agenda for the Department of Business and Trade is one that is extremely attractive for the future.
Harriet Baldwin, the Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Some of the most successful small and medium-sized businesses which truly think long-term are owned by families. So why does he think it will help his long-term growth mission for the government to start taxing these businesses when they get passed on to the next generation?
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, with respect, I hear a lot of calls from the Conservative Party to cut taxes and increase spending, but still no account of how they would actually do that. And I appreciate sometimes the initial transfer into opposition can feel exhilarating, but there is a responsibility that comes with it as well. And I would like to see an account from the Conservative Party as how they would pay for this. I would say for all tax changes across the board, to the Shadow Minister, we can still say with real confidence the UK has a competitive tax system, benchmark our corporation tax and our allowances around that, our capital gains taxes, in this case our inheritance taxes. And I think the mistake the Conservative Party makes on this is they forget those adjustments to specific reliefs for businesses and agricultural property are on top of the existing inheritance tax thresholds. And I would say, quite frankly, a little less scaremongering and a bit of focusing on what's really at stake here would be welcome from the opposition benches.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Sarah Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. Small businesses are at the heart of our local communities. So firms like Carbon 360 in my constituency of Chippenham are cutting-edge manufacturers of carbon fibre products. However, their growth as a small business is seriously affected by their ability to attract and retain quality staff. And this is predominantly because of the poor public transport and completely non-existent cycle routes. These cut across these issues, cut right across government departments. And I would therefore be grateful if the Minister could confirm what discussions he has had with ministerial colleagues in other departments about how rural transport infrastructure would greatly support these small and medium-sized businesses. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I very much welcome the honourable member's question. She is right to say some of the issues which affect Businesses in our constituencies the most often sit in other government departments, and I believe the role of this department is to be the focus and champion of those issues across all of government, whether it sits neatly in this department or not. She correctly highlights the incredible and important role that rural businesses play and the social as well as the economic benefits that they contribute. I would say specifically on her points about transport, which I think are well made. One of the big changes in the budget was that ability to focus on long-term investment, something that was recognised by the OBR with the assessment that the productive potential of the UK economy will grow significantly over the next decade because of that increased focus, investment. Transport's a great element of that, whether it's in my constituency or in hers, so I can assure her those needs that she's articulating are considered at the highest levels of government.
Colin Anderson.
Question number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will answer questions 9 and 18 together. Growth is this government's #1 mission, and in her Mansion House speech, the Chancellor announced a package of reforms to drive growth and investment across the UK. I have lost count of the number of times I've had conversations with businesses where they have talked about how our appetite for risk is not in the right place, and we are looking to reform that. And here in DBT, we are driving change through our new industrial strategy, working across government departments, which we will publish in the spring.
Colin Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her response. High-growth companies across the Buckingham-Bletchley constituency rely on foreign direct investment for their growth and innovation. Can she set out what steps that her department and the Minister for Investment are taking to ensure that the offers for investment can attract more foreign private investment, which help high-potential industries in which Britain excels?
Can I thank my honourable friend for his question? So we have an expanded Office for Investment, which is bringing together the Department of Business and Trade, number 10, and the Treasury. Our Investment Minister is working at pace, travelling around the world to bring in investment. I met with her and with the Office for Investment this week, and we are in constant dialogue about how we bring more foreign direct investment into the country, building on the £63 billion of investment announced at the Investment Summit, and how we can kickstart this economy after 14 years of failure.
Luke Charles.
Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor of the Exchequer mentioned growth over 40 times in her superb Mansion House speech. York, Leeds and beyond will benefit from this. How will my honourable friend ensure that the industrial strategy delivers for financial services so that we can achieve the growth this country desperately needs?
My honourable friend is absolutely right to highlight our UK financial services sector, which of course is absolutely world leading, and we are developing through the Treasury a 10-year financial services strategy, and of course financial services are one of the pillars in our industrial strategy that we'll be publishing in the spring. But we can't take the UK's status as a global financial centre for granted. In a highly competitive world, we need to earn that status, we need to work to keep it, and that's what we intend to do.
Patrick Hurley.
Number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the Government is committed to doubling the size of the mutuals and co-op sector. The creation of GB Energy will help drive a significant expansion in the number of energy cooperatives, while work to modernise co-op, credit union and mutual law to drive expansion has also recently been announced by Treasury colleagues. And we will be working particularly closely on this agenda with the recently established Mutual and Cooperative Business Council. We'll bring forward further proposals in due course.
Patrick Hurley.
Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister for that reply. Cooperative businesses can be the lifeblood of our towns and communities. In my own constituency, I've been working with stakeholders and interested parties to bring about a community cooperative bookshop following the closure in recent years of independent bookshops in Southport due to the cost of living. So may I take this opportunity to firstly further promote new expressions of interest in this regard, and secondly to ask the Minister to confirm what more support this government can provide for our cooperative sector so that towns like mine can see a thriving high street built around our community.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to underline the positive community impact that cooperatives and mutual businesses, social enterprises too, can have not only on our high streets but also in our communities more generally. We've recently announced a significant increase in the capital available to the British Business Bank, and that has enabled us to give more support, £150 million worth of additional support to community banks, community development finance institutions as they're officially known, which will help to drive more lending to community businesses, potentially including the one that my honourable friend has set out. But if there's anything I can do to support the initiative he's taking, I'd be very happy to meet him to discuss it.
Question 11, Mr. Speaker.
Businesses in Northern Ireland, as in businesses across the UK, are crying out for stability, for open trade, for an environment where we can break down barriers to growth and investment, and that is what this government across the board is working to deliver. My department has a team in Belfast to help stay close to businesses in Northern Ireland, understand what they need, and of course we work closely with Invest NI and the Department for the Economy and other key partners, and I have talked with Northern Ireland businesses in my short time in office, and I'm very encouraged by their passion and resilience.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Now, Northern Ireland businesses, large and small, saw just 0.6% of what the government spent with UK defence companies between 2018 and 2023, compared with 25% in the south east of England. And now, as my committee heard when we visited Northern Ireland last week, Spirit Aerosystems, which work on high-value defence and other aerospace contracts, face an uncertain future as half of its 3,600-strong workforce in Belfast wait to find out whether their jobs are safe following Boeing's buyout of the company and subsequent takeover by Airbus of only 50% of the work at its site in the city. We all know what happens to supply chains, to communities, to individuals. So what discussions are ministers having with Cabinet colleagues, with Airbus and with other interested parties to safeguard those jobs at Spirit now and to increase government spend with Northern Ireland defence companies in the future? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We love a long question, and it was a good one. And I thank my thank my honourable friend. She is absolutely right to raise this issue, and it is one that we are all, of course, concerned about. I know that my friend, the Secretary of State, met last week with the global CEO of Airbus. I have met with Airbus and Boeing and Spirit Aerosystems and talked about this issue. We care about the jobs. We care about the future of our defence industry in the UK. It's incredibly important to us for many, many reasons. So we are doing what we can to make sure there is a good outcome.
Yeah. No, this will be a good example of a short question, Jim Shannon.
Right. Challenged already. Can I say that the Minister has a deep interest in Northern Ireland? We know that, and in the short term, the time that the Minister has been the Minister here, she has shown that quite clearly. When it comes to defence, light engineering or cyber security, they're vital for jobs and economy in Northern Ireland. But can I ask the Minister quite specifically, what assessments have been made on the sustainability and the efficiency of the Northern Ireland agri-food sector, and will the Minister commit to promoting the productivity of the industry across the United Kingdom and indeed across the world? That's as short as I can make it, Mr. Speaker.
Well, look, the agri-food sector is incredibly important. I meet with the sector and will do all I can, and very keen, as always, to talk to my honourable friend about what more we can do as government to support the sector.
Polly Billington.
Question 13, Mr. Speaker.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 13, 14, 16 and 19 together. Working across government with mayors, local authorities and crucially local communities, we are beginning to tackle antisocial behaviour and crime, reform business rates, work with the banking industry to roll out 350 banking hubs, stamping out late payments, empowering communities to make the most of vacant properties, strengthening the post office network and reforming the apprenticeship levy.
Billington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the new powers delegated to local authorities to be able to tackle the blight of empty shop fronts and rejuvenate our local high streets. This will be particularly welcome in the East Thanet, where the Ramsgate Empty Shops campaign have been powerful advocates for addressing this. We have a 24% vacancy rate in Ramsgate High Street. What steps is the government taking to support and encourage local businesses and community projects to take over these vacant properties?
Well, I commend my honourable friend for her work with the Ramsgate Empty Shops campaign. The experience she has on her high street is sadly echoed up and down the country, where vacancy rates under the party opposite on our high streets shot up in recent years. High street rental auctions, which is the new powers that she alludes to, will help local councils working with local communities bring vacant units back into use. It will hopefully help to drive cooperation between landlords and councils and make town centre tenancies more accessible and affordable. We're encouraging local authorities to take advantage of these powers. And as I suspect my honourable friend knows already, colleagues in the Department for Housing and Local Government are looking to do further work in this space.
Sir Oliver Dowden.
Question number 14, Mr. Speaker.
That's the question you grouped.
I didn't realise you'd grouped them, Mr. Speaker. Forgive me. Schoolboy error. What advice would the Minister give struggling businesses in my constituency who are trying to work out how to absorb Labour's national insurance hike? Would he advise them to increase their prices, to squeeze wages, or to cut investment? And can he explain to them how that fits with the government's promises to increase growth?
Minister.
I think the best advice I could give to businesses in his constituency is to never vote Conservative again. His and his party's idea of good economics in government seemed to be to create a huge fiscal hole and leave it to the next administration to fix it. We are working at pace to try and tackle the difficult economic inheritance he and his colleagues in government helped to create. Measures such as the industrial strategy, measures such as those, albeit some difficult measures in the budget that we have taken, will help to bring back economic stability to this country. And in the long run, that will help businesses in his constituency and indeed constituencies up and down the country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Small Business Saturday, I recently had the pleasure of visiting Derby's small businesses of various types, which are the beating heart of our city. But as our planned city centre regeneration project recognises, empty shops on our high street do not reflect the high-performing, high-technology economy which we're so proud to have in Derby. Building on the new community right to buy, what more can the department do to ensure that community groups receive the correct business advice and support to utilise this new right and breathe new life and vibrancy into our high streets?
Well, I commend my honourable friend not only for his work just recently on Small Business Saturday, but for his work as leader of Derby Council to drive the town centre regeneration work that he's just alluded to. We are determined to establish a small business growth service to provide better support and information to small businesses so that entrepreneurs in this country can take advantage of new powers to set up on the high street, to set up small businesses, perhaps capitalising on the high-tech, high-growth sectors of the economy which Derby has access to. And in that way, making sure that we see benefits from the industrial strategy, not just to bigger businesses, but also to smaller businesses going forward.
Mark Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend will know from his visit to Gateshead this week some of the fantastic small businesses that we have on our high street, but also some of the incredible challenges faced by so many high streets and town centres. With that in mind, will he tell us what the government is doing on access to finance for small businesses?
Well, despite the considerable cold, I very much enjoyed my recent visit to Gateshead town centre and was impressed by the dynamism of the businesses that he and I met at his instigation in the railway quarter. One of the things that we're determined to do is to increase access to finance for small businesses up and down the country. That's why we provided over £1 billion across this year and next year for the British Business Bank, particularly to drive access to finance for small businesses such as the ones that he introduced me to.
Shadow Minister Dame Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the ingredients for a successful high street is having a post office in the mix. The government has inherited a network of 11,500 post offices, and that number has been stable since 2010. Will he commit to supporting high streets by maintaining the scale of the post office network in this Parliament.
Yes, we're determined to maintain and indeed strengthen the Post Office network. I suspect she will recognise that we inherited a post office with huge problems, which we are working with the new leadership of the Post Office to try and begin to tackle. We're looking at what new commercial opportunities there might be for the post office going forward. Banking appears to be the most significant one in that regard. And we're also working with the Post Office to identify some of the infrastructure problems they have, not least developing a replacement for the Horizon scheme.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much. Question number 15, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Parental Rights Survey 2019 found that 89% of employee mothers took maternity leave and 70% of employee fathers took paternity leave. Take-up of shared parental leave is much lower. It's very disappointingly low, in fact, which is why we are committed to a review of the parental leave system. Work is underway to deliver on that, and I will update in due course.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much. I agree with the Minister. It is very disappointing. And for many parents, current maternity pay is too low and the leave system isn't flexible enough. A recent report by the BBC said that almost half of new fathers were actually unaware of what was available to them. And the system is skewed against, the take-up is lower amongst lower-earning families. That's particularly important, was pointed out to me by a constituent in Edinburgh West, for those with multiple births, who need not only more time but more financial support in maternity. So would the Minister agree with me that maternity pay levels need to be increased, the flexibility of the scheme needs to be improved, and also public awareness?
Well, the Honourable Member makes a number of points which I'm sure we'll consider as part of the review that we're undertaking. But of course it's right that the Employment Rights Bill has a number of important measures to support working families, bringing 1.5 million parents into scope for parental leave and another 32,000 into scope for paternity leave. We're keen to build on that. We do want to support families who are in work.
Mr. Osborne.
Question number 17, Mr. Speaker.
Creative industries are a huge force for good in our country, responsible for 2.4 million jobs last year and over £124 billion for our GDP in 2022. They're one of the 8 growth sectors in our industrial strategy, so we're working closely with DCMS and across government to identify what more we can do to draw out even more of the potential growth that Britain's creative businesses can offer.
Mr. Osborne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As we all settle down for Christmas, we will all be watching Mission Impossible, James Bond, Ironclad, and maybe even Call the Midwife, all filmed in Medway. And also Great Escape, not filmed in Medway, unfortunately. Can the Minister explain to me how we can make Mission Impossible possible across our country when it comes to new films?
I cannot follow the impressive nature of that question from my honourable friend, but what I can tell him is that my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, in the budget confirmed a new independent film tax credit, which will help to enable successes that he has alluded to in his constituency and the surrounding area to potentially be spread across the country and allow more businesses to set up and generate growth and wealth for our country.
Lucas.
Question number 20, Mr. Speaker.
No decisions have been taken on the future of any directly managed branches, including in Chester Lilly Street in my honourable friend's constituency. The Post Office continues to work with local communities and others to consider how to best meet the needs for post office services in a local area. The government sets minimum access criteria to ensure that 99% of the UK population lives within 3 miles of a post office. The government set access criteria ensures that regardless of changes, services remain within reach of all citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Post Office in Chesterley Street has been at the heart of the community in North Durham since 1936 and offers vital services to my constituents. Does the Minister agree that keeping these services accessible is vital to keeping footfall on our high streets and encouraging other businesses to locate themselves there?
Well, I recognise the significance of the post office in my honourable friend's constituency, as indeed I recognise the significance of the post offices in my own constituency and across the UK. It is important to maintain access to post office services. They do play a crucial role in the high street, and that's why we are determined to work with the post office to strengthen the network, as I've alluded to earlier.
We now come to topicals. Alex Baker.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, it has been a hugely significant 6 months for the Department for Business and Trade. After our record-breaking International Investment Summit and our Industrial Strategy Green Paper publication, my department has been engaging with businesses big and small to drive growth. Just this week, we've helped land a £500 million train building deal with Hitachi, securing hundreds of jobs in the North East, another promise fulfilled from the election campaign. For smaller businesses, we're reforming business rates to breathe new life into our high streets, while launching a new fair payment code, tackling late payments to SMEs, and supporting new high street rental auctions to improve town centres. And as we've heard, our brand new business growth service will streamline SME support on everything from finance to exports. We're also tackling the challenges we've inherited, negotiating a better deal for Tata Steel's employees in Port Talbot, whilst progressing a UK-wide steel strategy. And our Horizon Convictions Redress Scheme shows that we are righting the wrongs of the past for victims of the Post Office scandal. I look forward to working with all honourable members in the new year, delivering on our plan for change, going for growth, and realising a decade of national renewal. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to wish all honourable members, yourself and businesses across the UK a very Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Thank you. You're very kind.
Speaker, my constituents still mourn the loss of our M&S outlet in 2015, but we are delighted that Super Bowl UK has just opened in Aldershot. These anchor retail and leisure tenants are so vital for our town centres. So what can the government do to assist communities like mine to ensure that we can encourage businesses to be the cornerstone and footfall drivers of our town centres?
I very much agree and welcome the question from my honourable friend. I certainly recognise that high streets are going through a transition from being primarily retail centres to now have much more of a mix of retail, hospitality and leisure, and I'm delighted to hear about Super Bowl's investment in Aldershot. Mr. Speaker, I'm not nostalgic for a town centre or a high street that has passed. It's about how we do that transition into the future. But there is great practice around the country, in Aldershot, in Walthamstow, where I was recently, and the government's agenda is absolutely committed to delivering that.
It's topicals, and so in which case I'll come to the Shadow Secretary of State as a good example. Andrew Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the great British innovations is the gift of free trade, lifting billions out of poverty abroad and increasing prosperity at home. Thanks to the Conservatives this week, the UK proudly joined the CPTPP bloc of some of the world's fastest growing economies, as well as major trading partners and investors like Japan and Canada. With the government having precious little else to show on growth so far, would the Secretary of State update this House on when he expects to conclude free trade deals with the Gulf, with India and with the US?
Well, at least we have some of that question we can agree on, a nice start to the Christmas period. I agree that the UK has always been and must be a champion of free trade in a world in 2025 where I think trade issues will politically be quite significant. We can work together on that future. We believe we have progressed the GCC trade deal significantly. The honourable member will know there were some problems between the last government and particularly some countries in the GCC, particularly the UAE, where the relationship had unfortunately gotten to a very difficult place. We've repaired that. The talks are going well. It's always a mistake to put a deadline on those because it can limit your own negotiating potential. When it comes to the US, we'll see what happens with the new president-elect, but I'm looking forward to a negotiation and discussion about that.
Come on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, you can count on our support to bring those deals forward. It pains me to say it, but as we've heard today, business confidence is at an all-time low. Bar the pandemic, hiring is collapsing and companies are fleeing. Labour have talked growth, but they've delivered decline. The one game changer now would be a US trade deal. Would the Secretary of State urge the Prime Minister to stop obsessing about going backwards into the EU and agree with me at this Christmas time that the best gift for British business this Christmas would be for the Prime Minister to get on a plane to Washington and talk trade with President Trump?
I'm afraid I think the Shadow Secretary of State's analysis is too simplistic. The US is a major trade partner and always will be, but he will know so is the European Union, and so areas where we can do so is our trade with China. And the future for the UK is being positioned to get the maximum benefit from all of those key markets. That the kind of agreement the Honourable Gentleman is putting forward would obviously have major ramifications for British agriculture in particular. He knows the issues that are associated with that. So we cannot consider one of those trade negotiations without considering the impact on all of those key trading relationships. I just ask him to consider that in a more holistic and complete way.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to the successful International Investment Summit that my right honourable friend mentioned earlier, that secured £63 billion of investment for the UK, the First Minister of Wales, Eluned Morgan, has recently announced that Wales will itself hold its own major investment summit next year. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that this announcement demonstrates the power of two Labour governments working together in partnership to deliver economic growth for the communities that we represent?
Yeah, well, Mr. Speaker, I may be biased, but I thought the International Investment Summit we held was the best day of this year, not just because of the investment and the real tangible jobs that come from that, but because of the clear, simple message we could put out there: stability, openness, improving the investment environment. I'm delighted to hear the news from Wales. I would also say, not only will we support that, I really appreciate the strong working relationship we have on issues like Port Talbot and getting a better deal for that community in the workforce. We've worked absolutely hand in glove with the Welsh Labour Government, and it absolutely strengthens the things that we're able to do together.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Sarah Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow, on Friday the 13th, the EU's General Product Safety Regulations come into effect, and businesses are telling me that the additional costs will mean that they can no longer sell to the EU and to Northern Ireland. What steps is the department taking to ensure that small businesses are going to be supported as these regulations come into effect? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Honourable Lady's quite rightly pointed out, these regulations come into force tomorrow. They already are things that most businesses are doing already, but we have provided guidance for businesses, including online marketplaces, on how these regulations will apply in Northern Ireland. We will continue to engage with businesses and online marketplaces to ensure that we are supporting them in dealing with this new regulation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I declare an interest as an officer of the Critical Minerals APPG. Although Cornwall sits on some of the richest deposits of critical minerals in the world, including tin and lithium in my constituency of Camborne, Redruth and Hale, there are significant geological reserves right across the United Kingdom, including in the north of England, Northern Ireland, and in the lands of our Celtic cousins in Wales and in Scotland. Can the Minister confirm that domestic critical mineral production and processing will form a key part of the government's industrial strategy?
Well, I very much welcome my honourable friend's question, and I welcome the time we spent together at South Crofty Tin Mine, which was one of my favourite visits again of the year. Look, I think this is a hugely exciting area. I think the opportunities, particularly for his area, are particularly exciting. I believe what we need is an open, transparent trading system where these products will be able to have the certainty of the access to markets that will unlock the ability to use those deposits in a way to all of our mutual interests for ourselves and our allies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Farmers in my constituency of Bicester and Woodstock maintain the highest animal welfare standards, and they want reassurance that these will not be undercut by any future UK-US trade deal, as they were by some of the deals done by the previous government. Can the Minister assure me that the mandate and the detail of a trade deal will come to this House before the government signs it, as many members of the front bench agreed to in opposition, and if not, why not?
Mr. Speaker, there's an established process in terms of taking forward the discussions of the government in relation to the mandate. In relation to animal welfare standards, the Secretary of State has already alluded to the fact that there was clearly considerable divergence under the previous attempts to conclude an FTA with the United States, and I can assure the House that we continue as a new government to take these issues of animal welfare extremely seriously.
Alice MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In Norwich, we have many amazing businesses like Norwich Glass Company, Cafe 193, Great Eastern Modern Railways that I visited recently. One of the challenges they and the Norfolk Chamber of Commerce and the FSB have raised with me is the challenge of attracting skilled staff. Can the Minister set out how the government skills plan will support businesses like those to attract the staff they need?
very much recognise what she is saying in her question, which is that skills will always be one of, if not the biggest issue for businesses going forward. And of course, because that sits in the Department of Education, we work very closely with our colleagues around that. The creation of Skills England, the reforms to the apprenticeship levy to create the growth and skills levy, and indeed I think my next week CEO call, which is something I do regularly, is with the Secretary of State for Education to discuss this problem. Businesses from her constituency would be very welcome to join that.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the Secretary of State and I agree with each other that creating high-value jobs in science and technology is important. In local business, our local plan gives us the opportunity to build a science and technology park, delivering over 5,000 high-value jobs. But we can't proceed until the Department for Transport releases funds for local highway improvements. Will the Minister press the Secretary of State for Transport to take action so that we can work and progress and we can deliver jobs and growth in mid-Sussex?
Okay. Welcome the honourable member's question. I think perhaps one more for the Secretary of State for Transport, but she's very skillfully put that to me, and I can assure her I'll work with her to do that. I do think, Mr. Speaker, how we assemble investment sites for investment is a huge issue. How we can work better across government with local partners too is a key issue for us.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And last week, research published by SAGE showed that 84% of businesses, small businesses in the North East plan to increase their investment in technology next year. As the Science, Innovation and Technology Select Committee launches our inquiry into innovation and regional growth, how will the Business Secretary ensure that the industrial strategy boosts adoption of technology, and particularly British developed technology, to boost growth across all our regions?
Well, my honourable friend will be aware that the Chancellor of the Exchequer recently announced £20.4 billion in investment for research and development for the next year, which will help to drive even further investment in the type of technological investment that she rightly champions. We're also working with small businesses to encourage them to adopt more digital technologies through the Digital Adoption Task Force.
Alison Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Businesses in Bognor Regis and Hillhampton are at the sharp end of the Bank of England's Business Confidence Survey. Unlike the Chancellor and the Secretary of State, they know that her budget and the Employment Rights Bill will be a recipe for higher prices, higher inflation, higher interest rates and higher unemployment. Is that the growth the Secretary of State had in mind?
Mr. Speaker, I think we've had 7 or 8 of the same question from the opposition benches and not a single answer to how they would pay for the promises that they make. We are getting on with fixing the foundations, looking to the future, improving the business environment across the board. That's why businesses in her area and mine should look to 2025 with some real confidence.
Ewan Steinbank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I declare an interest as co-chair of the APPG on British buses. The Secretary will be aware of the consultation on 160 jobs at Alexander Dennis in my constituency of Falkirk. In September, they've cited an increasingly unlevel playing field over a number of years for domestic bus manufacturers. This shows the requirement for a clear industrial strategy. What assurances can the Minister give me as part of implementing the industrial strategy the Labour Government is working to level the playing field for domestic manufacturers?
I very much recognise the issue and welcome him raising it. As I said at the Society for Motor Manufacturers annual dinner, it matters to this government that we make these products in the UK. I know there's been some specific issues around procurement, mainly with local areas. I'll promise him the meeting he needs to take that forward, but I can assure him the industrial strategy will be covering this issue.
Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Kirsty is self-employed and she's looking to adopt her child, but she doesn't qualify for either adoption leave or adoption pay. Because she's not having her child biologically, she doesn't qualify for the maternity allowance also. Would the government support changing this, whether through the Employment Rights Bill or otherwise, so that brilliant future parents are not put off from adopting because they can't afford it?
I think that's a very interesting question. There's a great interplay there between rights for self-employed people and we're actually committing to doing a review of that in due course, together with a wider look at the parental leave system. So we'll get back to her on that.
Sam Rushell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I say, I really welcome this government's commitment to getting more disposable income in the pockets of working people. At Christmas time, a lot of people will want to buy concert tickets. What conversations is he having with ministerial colleagues around the Cabinet on reforming the secondary ticketing market?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. We are hopefully going to be making an announcement very shortly about some plans in that area.